Tonight, Syria's deposed president insists he never considered stepping down. Bashar al Assad denied plotting to flee to Moscow, but those who supported him are now worried about rebel retaliation. We hear from the young grave diggers of Damascus, searching for human remains after a decade-old mass execution. Rebels have promised to protect minorities and say there is nothing to fear. Tonight, I'll ask Bashar al Assad's first cousin, a vocal critic, about his hopes for a new Syria. Also coming up to 1,000 people feared dead in France's poorest region after a cyclone hit the island of Mayotte. And what we know about the Chinese spy who infiltrated the royal family and the government. Plus, drone conspiracy, questions for the White House after dozens of apparent sightings on the East Coast. That's all coming up on The World with me, Gillian Joseph. Good evening. All the clues suggested that the man who oversaw Syria's repressive regime fled his country on a Russian plane as rebels circled Damascus. But tonight, in his first statement since he was deposed, Bashar al-Assad gave his account of what happened. He claims he was evacuated from this Russian airbase after it came under attack and says he had every intention of staying and fighting the group he described as terrorists. But as he and his family start their new life in Moscow, inside Syria, evidence of atrocities committed under his rule are being uncovered every day. These bones are all that are left after at least 40 people were massacred in a Damascus suburb more than a decade ago. These two men have shaped Syria's future. From one, families of the disappeared are demanding answers. The other instills fear in those who supported the regime. We'll discuss them both tonight and hear from someone who is more aware than most of the Assad family's bloody legacy. But let's get started with a report from Chief Correspondent Stuart Ramsey.
A busy Russian airbase on Syria's Mediterranean coast, the main logistics hub for Russia's military and, vitally, its air link to Moscow. It's now emerged that it's from here that Bashar al Assad made his escape from Syria as his army collapsed and the rebels rolled into Damascus. He flew to Moscow on the advice of Russia, he says in a statement, because the base was coming under attack. The fact is, he was cornered. In the statement, his first since he was overthrown, he says, "At no point during these events did I consider stepping down or seeking refuge. The only course of action was to continue fighting against the terrorist onslaught." Rebels are now outside the airport that shares the base runway. They were that near to him, although a Russian helicopter gunship we filmed patrolling the skies would almost certainly have guaranteed his safety while he was spirited away. A few minutes away from the base, HTS soldiers man a checkpoint to the city of Jabla. Assad knew it well. It was an Alawite city, a minority group from which the Assad family descended. It's ironic, he flew over the very people who now feel threatened by their links to the Assad regime. For over 50 years, the Assad senior military officers and advisors were Alawites. The Alawites are not popular in today's Syria, and they know it. In a suburb community, we were asked to speak to their local leaders. We were surrounded, everyone wanting to talk. Put bluntly, they're plain scared. So ultimately you want to have law and order guaranteed, acknowledgement of your own rights being a minority.
انتم بكون قانون وعدل يكونوا مضمونين أيوة ضمان حقوق الأقليات
ضمان حقوق الأقليات.
We want to the rights of the minorities to be secured.
What are women worried about?
شو المخاوف اللي عند النساء هلا؟
المخاوف انه ما يكون في عنا امان انه يصير في عنا طائفيه فقط.
We're afraid about losing security and having sectarianism.
في انه ايام المجرم كان يعيشنا انه هون
During the era of the criminal, we used to live in a classist way. We want to live in security. That's everything we want. This is the most important thing, and from there we can solve everything. We just want security and health.
In the centre of town, HTS patrols seem remarkably out of place, more like an occupying force. The local community say they want to be included in any new Syria. What they are saying to us is that if their human rights are respected in the same way as every other community, then they're quite happy that there's a change in leadership. For the new government, if they want to make this new freedom a success, they'll have to acknowledge and protect all the minority communities in Syria. Assad's flight to Moscow gives them the opportunity. Stuart Ramsey, Sky News, Jabla.
Well, each day, more evidence is gathered of the atrocities committed by the Assad regime. Chillingly, it's children who are often left to literally pick through the bones left behind in mass graves. Our international correspondent, Diana Magnay, visited the site of a suspected massacre carried out by Assad's forces 11 years ago. She sent this report.
10-year-old Yusuf calls himself the grave digger. When we meet him, he has a small bucket of human bones, which he carries around like a trophy. Come, let me show you, he says. This is where most of the bodies are, and over there are more. Tadamon is where, in April 2013, regime soldiers executed at least 41 people. We know because it was videoed, footage which found its way out of Syria 6 years later. It is horrific, and so we've blurred it. But what we can show you are men dressed as if they've just been picked up off the street, hands tied behind their back. They're hauled to the side of a mass grave, pushed in and shot. Now that Assad is gone, it is children who are digging up the bodies of their neighbours and unearthing the evidence of war crimes. Is it the first time that you found bones here, or did you always know that this had happened in your neighbourhood? No, we've known for a long time now, Yusuf says. I've been here for 9 years, so I've known since I was 1 year old. We wouldn't dare say a word about it, this woman says. They'd kill us. Mohammed's son Hussam went missing the day of the massacre, and he's sure that he was killed here.
I'm begging the UN and all countries and the Red Cross, please let us see the bodies, just to get some peace of mind, see how they killed him. Why would these people kill him?
But it is a massive task ahead for forensic investigators, and that's if Syria stays stable enough to see it through. There are so many missing, so many who were disappeared. And this is just one site that we know about because the men who committed this murder chose to film it. But there must be so many more mass graves in this neighbourhood, the locals tell us, across this country that will need to be excavated, uncovered, before the Syrian people can have any form of closure. The people we speak to know who the perpetrators are, henchmen of Assad's military intelligence, and they want to see them and others held to account.
They did all this to scare and terrorise people into doing as they were told. They did it to show the people who was boss. If they didn't kill them, they terrorised them.
He's holding a picture of a man he claims beat him brutally. He says he dreams of justice. And if the new government can't provide that, he says he'll do it himself. Diana Magnay, Sky News, Damascus.
Well, the Assad family has been synonymous with Syria for more than 5 decades. But now that the dynasty has fallen, how will the country be governed? I'm joined tonight by Ribal al Assad, who is first cousin to the deposed president. Thank you very much for coming in to speak to us. First of all, I'm sure people want to know, what is your relationship with Bashar al Assad?
Yes, thank you very much for having me. Well, first of all, I've been exiled from my country when I was 9 years old, and I went back very shortly in 93, 94, and then I had an argument with Bashar in front of the Sheraton Hotel, and I stood up to him, and a couple of months later, they tried to assassinate me at the Damascus International Airport. And then I left. They arrested me that day. For shortly before my father threatened the president. That he's not gonna, if they do anything to me, that he's gonna do something. But that day when I saw that, I saw them. I could have been really killed if my father didn't come with me to the airport with my family, with my mother and sisters. So I just left, and I came back in '97 for Christmas holidays from Boston, and my father then left Syria, and I stayed there to help our charities. We're supporting around 4,500, families. And then they started to cutting off the electricity, cutting off the water, all of those things. So my father said, come to Spain to explain to me what's going on, So once I went there, 10 days later, they came and bombed our house in Latakia, and using gunships, tanks, rocket launchers, they gassed people there. And I was trying to call people here in the media, others, and saying, please, it's my house. It's not, the regime was saying this is an illegal port, belonging to us. I said, but it's not a port. Please go see it. There's a hotel in front of us. There's many houses next to our house. There's an intelligence, a building, a military intelligence building in front of the house. Please go check it out. It was impossible to do anything.
So you've met Bashar al Assad more than once then?
No, that was the only time in front of the Sheraton Hotel, yeah. And because his brother had just passed away. And when I was at the funerals and people were carrying him, so I thought he was really abnormal because he was, when your brother passes away, you should be sad, but people were carrying him and he was waving his arm like, I'm next in line, And I was like, this guy is really, he's disturbed, to do that. He has no compassion, at least for his older brother who just passed away. He should be, crying, going inside. I don't know, but you cannot be just, happy that people your bodyguards are carrying you on their shoulders.
But this is your first cousin that you're talking about.
Yes.
And what did you and your immediate family think of his regime?
Well, first of all, in 2000, when his father passed away, we right away said we're against him taking over, because as you know, he was catapulted from 94 to 2000 to become the highest ranking military, rank, and then the head of the Ba'ath Party, which he had no idea what it was. So we knew that he was just kept there by the people around his father so that he could keep their interest in place. But then when we first made this, saying that we are against this, we should move towards a democratic change and all of that, everyone, Madeleine Albright, I think Tony Blair, Jacques Chirac, King Abdullah of Jordan, King Abdullah of Saudi when he was crown prince, went there and, kind of give him legitimacy. This is the guy we want him to be we want to be in power. So we were like, okay, well, if you want him, if the whole world wants him, what can we do?
I have to ask you about your father,
yes,
Ribal al Assad, the uncle of Bashar al Assad, and there are reports of him being named as the butcher of Hama by a US journalist who described his alleged role, has to be said, alleged, in overseeing the unlawful imprisonment, torture and execution of between 10,000 and 40,000 people in 1982. What do you say about that allegation?
Well, I said it many times, before, and I think this is Thomas Friedman, the American journalist, isn't it? I think Thomas Friedman said that it was a Lebanese businessman who told him that my father told him. He didn't even name that businessman, So, first of all, my father was not in Hama, and he said it repeatedly, and I've said it. Unlike General Mustafa Atlas, who was Minister of Defense, who said in a Der Spiegel article that he used to sign 150 death warrants every week during his tenure in office. That's for 30 years. So that's tens of thousands of people. But nobody ever spoke about him or went against him. Why? Because, again, he's not an Assad. He's not part of the Alawite community. So this is very sectarian. My father said, I was never there because there was 3 divisions there already. My father was responsible for the protection of the capital, Damascus. And there was a Defense Intelligence Agency report that was released. It was a secret report that was released in 2013. Not naming my father's troops, and saying that the number of dead were around 2,000, and amongst them 400 part of the special forces of the Muslim Brotherhood.
So you're saying the allegations are completely untrue?
Of course, they're untrue because, first of all, also that you have to know, the population of Hama at the time was 170,000, and the fighting, the whole war lasted a bit over 3 weeks. So it's impossible. That first the numbers, and second, yes, there was a fight, of course. There were 3 divisions, around 45,000 troops who were surrounding Hama. There was a conflict between them, you remember Nahr al-Barid in Lebanon much later on, or Fallujahs between the US, UK forces and the Islamic extremism, or Black September in Jordan. And those conflicts were much longer, and the numbers of deaths were much lower, like about around 1,000, 2,000. And this goes, again, together with the DIA report.
We're running out of time. I just want to get a couple more questions in, and the first of which being, what happens now to other family members, those that bear the surname al-Assad, that are still in Syria?
Yes, well, again, that's very sad because I've said it repetitively, that we have 2 Assads in power. We cannot blame a whole family where the majority have no food, no money. Today, there are many of them in Lebanon calling me every day. They don't even have money to stay in Lebanon. You know, they said, we cannot, please find us a place where we could work, we be refugees. We never had, took advantage of anything. This regime had their cronies around them. Bashar would never even want to meet with any of them. And now they're left with their children, with everything. Those people who came in, the SGS, who are Al-Qaeda, and supporters from the Turkestan Islamic Party, for the Chinese and Dagestanis and Chechen, all those Islamic extremists that came into power, took over power, and people in Syria were waiting to move ahead. We've been waiting 50 years to move towards genuine representative democracy with a constitution, guaranteeing equality of all citizens under the rule of law, regardless of sect, religion, gender, and ethnic group. But sadly, what's going on, we don't want to see happening in Syria what happened in Iran 45 years ago, where the Shah's regime, which was a dictator, was replaced by, the mullahs. And now everyone is suffering, not only in Iran, but internationally. Everyone is suffering from them.
So what are your thoughts then on Hayat Tahrir al-Sham? Are they to be trusted to govern and to govern for everyone in Syria?
Of course not. First of all, as I said, the guy has $10 million on his head. He was a member of ISIS. And then he moved to become the leader of Al-Qaeda in Syria. And they committed as much atrocities in Syria as the regime. The United Nations stopped counting in 2014, and the number at the time was 400,000 killed. And they stopped counting. Now we're 10 years later, so we're definitely at over 1 million. Those people, them, ISIS, HGS, ISIS, and the regime committed all those crimes. So if we have to go after we have to have either a court to bring everyone. There's not one house in Syria that has not lost loved ones. So it's either we go after everyone from all sides, or we make a national reconciliation like happened in South Africa. But we cannot go saying, oh, now we're in power, now we're going to go have retributions against you. And this is what's happening today in the coastal region, where they're going after people, in Homs, in Hama, going after people, killing, raping, And every time people call and ask what's going on, they say, oh, these are people that don't belong, troops or groups that don't belong to us.
But the new regime, they've been very careful to distance themselves from the past and the Islamist past, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, however you call it. They've been very clear that that was the past, and they've now moved on, and they are going to represent all Syria.
Well, first of all, when they were coming into, when they moved from Idlib to Aleppo to Damascus, there were videos of them killing people, and then calling their families and telling them, oh, are you the mom of this gentleman? We have this phone. And she would be, yes, who is this? And she's like, we just would like you to know that we just cut your son's head off, And the mother or the brother starts crying and, telling her, we're coming for you tomorrow. So do you think those people who committed hundreds of thousands of atrocities could say, oh, now that we are in power, we're going to change? You remember Hamas when they came into power after throwing all the PLO people from the roofs of the buildings in Gaza? The same thing. Do you think people were going to dare vote against them after they killed the opponents? Or the Taliban when they came and said, we're going to start, we're going to change, and then all girls, they forbid girls from going to schools? Do you think genuinely that those people, it's like having bin Laden now, if he was still alive, and you have all those people going to him and saying, oh, great, after all the atrocities you did, and 9/11 and all of this, well, let's go talk to you, and you'll be back as a leader of whatever country.
Ribal al Assad, thank you very much for sharing your views with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Well, our international correspondent Diana Magnay joins me now live from Damascus. Diana, I wonder if you can reflect on what Ribal was just saying there about HST and whether they can govern Syria for all Syrians.
Well, I mean, I think you can sum it up by repeating what the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken said, which is that we will not trust them based on what they say, but on what they do. And as we've just heard from Bashar al Assad, citing all of those examples from Hamas to the Taliban of groups that we have considered and designated as terrorists who say they'll do one thing and then years later turn out to be just as the international community anticipated. I think, that is the sense you get from people here, that they are deeply nervous about what the future holds. Of course, HTS at the moment, Ahmed al-Sharaa, as he now chooses to call himself, dropping his nom de guerre of Abu Muhammad al-Jalani, and supposedly with it all his past associations, wants to say, I am for an inclusive society. We will set up a transitional government that will try and establish a new constitution for all Syrians. These are, of course, all the right things to do, but it is a very very divided country between numerous factions, all of whom, as we just heard from our guest, most of whom have someone missing in their family, have experienced the loss of loved ones. There is so much pain in this country. It is such a difficult one for any government to muddle through, let alone a government with Islamist roots. So we shall have to see. I don't think anybody knows what will happen. What we are seeing at the moment is inroads being made from all sorts of members of the international community. We've got the US saying that they've had direct contact now with HTS. David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, has said that he's sent a senior delegation to Damascus to talk to them. Also inroads being made by the EU. I can be pretty sure that the Kremlin is doing their best to talk to them about whether they can keep their bases going here in Syria. So I think HTS and Ahmed al-Sharaa is also trying to establish himself to keep his options open, essentially. He made some, I suppose, for Syria, relatively reconciliatory statements about Israel, saying, you know, of course, we think that they're using this situation to encroach upon our territory, and that is not acceptable. But at the moment, the Syrian people are exhausted with the fight, and now is the time for stability. We shall have to see. He's saying the right things. As I said, as Antony Blinken said, it is not what they say, it is what they do.
Indeed, Diana, thank you very much. Well, let's turn now to a developing story. In the United States this evening, at least 3 people are dead and 6 others injured after a shooting at a Christian school in the US state of Wisconsin. Police say the suspected attacker was already dead when officers arrived at the scene. Well, our US correspondent Mark Stone joins us now. Mark is down the line from Washington, I believe. OK, we're going to hear a report from him first.
It was just before 11 a.m. when the first calls came in.
Got a call coming in at Abundant Life Christian Church for a shooter just advising someone was shot.
Initially, confusion.
I'm hearing multiple things, possibly 1 deceased, maybe 6 people injured, at least 2 shot.
But quickly, some clarity.
Copy. Let's make this an active shooter incident.
A shooting at a school on the edge of Madison, and confirmation that the gunman was dead.
Shooter is down. 12 critical victims, 12 critical, no reported casualties.
And then the grim routine that feels in this country to be so tragically familiar. An officer updating the media with the latest.
When officers arrived, they found multiple victims suffering from gunshot wounds. Officers located a juvenile who they believe was responsible for this deceased in the building.
And revealing how often they are forced to train for this.
We train on this almost quarterly. The last time we trained on this as commanders was approximately 2 weeks ago. The protocols are simple. Stop the killing, stop the dying, find out who's doing this.
The eyewitnesses with reflections that could be from any one of this country's mass shootings.
The tragedy of all what the other kids have seen, the kids saw this and heard this. I mean, right before Christmas, how tough is that?
And the parents forced to wonder if their children were among the dead or injured.
My sister called me on the phone. She told me, please remain calm. So I was already trying to mentally prepare. But yeah, after a bit, I was kind of like, okay. And she's like, there is an active shooter at the school. She had like an inside source kind of tell her. And I just bolted out, drove down here. I called my husband, and he made his way over here.
The Abundant Life Christian School is private for kindergarten up to 12th grade. It's thought the gunman was one of the students, now dead, along with 2 others at the school, a teacher and a teenager. 9 people were injured, some seriously. Now, the questions for investigators. What was the motive? How was the weapon acquired? There have been nearly 500 mass shootings in America this year. 1,347 children under 18 have died in 2024 from gunshot wounds. Now, yet another American community is reeling. Mark Stone, Sky News.
You're watching The World with me, Gillian Joseph. Stay with me because coming up, we'll be talking about apparent drone sightings driving conspiracy theories on America's East Coast. And next, the latest on the tropical cyclone feared to have killed hundreds of people in France's poorest territory.
Big stories don't always come from big cities. I'm Lisa Dowd and I'm Sky's Midlands correspondent.
You are not getting in this elevator, okay?
The judge made it very clear that she could see no justifiable reason why Cyclone wasn't here facing British justice.
I promised I would get him justice.
Free, wherever you get your news. This is what they're up against. The wind is the really big problem. It is back-breaking work and the smoke is thick. It's been working well. Water levels are dropping, but no one knows what impact further rain will have. What would you do if this place wasn't open? This is the exact spot in Nottingham where their 19-year-old son, Barnaby Webber, lost his life.
I just think it's so cruel and so harsh.
It's really scary. We're terrified.
In this community, I'm told that everybody knows someone affected by COVID.
Hopefully this will be the last wave.
Sky News gets the full story first. Change seems tantalisingly close in this corner of the UK. Wales was the first to introduce the plastic bag charge. It's legal to let go. Set the speed and take the hands off. It's almost driverless, but not quite. Hans is a highly trained police dog. The force is incredible. It's really frightening, actually. This is my patch, my specialism. It's also my home.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party.
I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before? Yes. Cheers. We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
Welcome back. The aftermath of Cyclone Chido, which hit the French territory of Mayotte this weekend, has been compared to the devastation caused by a nuclear attack. Authorities say up to 1,000 people may have been killed after the island's worst storm for more than 90 years. Mayotte is situated in the Indian Ocean, between the coast of Mozambique and the island of Madagascar. Rescue efforts have been hampered by the territory's remote location and comparative poverty, as Yusra El-Bagir reports.
Much of this small island is now unrecognizable. The French military, deployed to Mayotte, survey what's left. Trees strewn across roads, cars abandoned, homes reduced to rubble. The human toll is still unclear, but likely catastrophic. Cyclone Chido's fury was unrelenting. The strongest storm to hit the French islands of Mayotte in nearly a century. Many of the neighborhoods, made up of shacks and huts, barely stood a chance. Entire communities now flattened. The French Interior Minister arrived to assess the devastation in the Overseas Department, governed from Paris.
If we want things to work well, we're going to pull out all the stops. We will mobilize everything we can mobilize in terms of civilian means and in terms of military means.
Chido has also wrought havoc on neighboring Mozambique. Aid agencies fear up to 2 million will be affected here. And those effects will be long-term. Children cut off from access to education and a heightened risk to life from waterborne diseases. Fears now for those already displaced by conflict in a country racked by instability.
When you're displaced, you don't have your own house and you cannot shelter well. So many people are just in huts, and those have just been destroyed. And you can see that also in Pemba town here, where you have close to 80,000 people displaced. We were out driving here on Sunday afternoon, assessing the situation. We can see that they are just flattened, the houses.
In Mayotte, what was already France's poorest region, now adjusting to even less. The future of the residents of this island, now desperately uncertain. Yusra al-Bagher, Sky News.
Well, let's go live to Mayotte now and speak to Senator Salama Remia. Good evening. Thank you very much for speaking to us. Tell us what the situation is like where you are now.
The situation is very hard. Like now it's midnight. We have no light, no water, no communication. And since yesterday, no food. The population, it's very difficult. There's no water to drink for the people and also for the houses. And we're waiting for survival. We're waiting that we have been told that they are going to come. They're arriving by plane from Réunion, which is an island 2 hours from Mayotte. So we're waiting, but the population is starving, I will say, and suffering now. Yeah.
And you say there's no electricity, no power, so the full extent of the devastation on the island and the lives that have been lost, you might not even know the full consequence of that as yet.
Exactly, because Mayotte is a two island, and I'm on the smallest one. And as we don't have any communication, we don't even know what is going on in the other side. So we just, even here, we cannot connect. We don't even know our families in the other side, what happened to them. So we're just waiting. First, that's why the electricity and the communication is very urgent for us. And what was really important also is the security, because as people are starving, there's some places they started they're still stealing, or they started stealing on shops and whatever. So it's very urgent that the food and water arrive quickly.
You must be absolutely terrified.
It is terrifying, but when you wake up and you see all around your house how it looks like, but you're still alive, you're still fine. I was alone with my daughter. So when you see all around, you say just thanks God to be safe. That's the more important. The others is only material.
What is the most urgent need at the moment, at this precise moment? What's the first thing that people need?
That's what I said, water to drink, and food. For me, that is very urgent. We have people, because we have taken the school, as it's holiday here, the holiday just started children have 1 month holiday. So we have taken the school, that's where we have put people to the one who hasn't have a house now. So, but those people, now they're in those houses, but with no food and no water. So for me, it's very, very urgent. And then the electricity, which is really difficult now, 2 days now with no electricity. For me, it's very, very important. And security, because we're starting being scared at night. We really started to be scared.
Senator Salama Ramia, thank you very much for speaking to us. We pray that help gets to you very soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, tropical cyclones are a regular natural phenomenon. But as ocean temperatures rise, scientists believe more intense storms will continue to cause significant damage to smaller, more unprotected islands. Here's our science editor, Tom Clark.
The track of Cyclone Chido over the Indian Ocean sent it directly across the tiny islands of Mayotte. As well as catastrophic winds of more than 130 miles an hour, it brought intense rain, shown by these bands, with over 25 centimetres causing flash flooding and landslides too. Seen from space, you can see how Mayotte took the full force of the compact storm with no large landmass to dissipate it, which is only now happening as the cyclone meets the African continent. It's the worst storm in 90 years to hit the islands, a tiny French territory north of Madagascar. 3/4 of the population, more than 300,000, live in relative poverty, many in informal settlements, squeezed onto an island the same size as the Isle of Wight. Mayotte is essentially a case study of the risk posed by storms as our planet warms. Tropical cyclone is an umbrella term. In the Atlantic and East Pacific, they're called hurricanes. In the Northwest Pacific, typhoons. Everywhere else, including the Indian Ocean, tropical cyclones. Storm tracks shown here, going back to Victorian times, show they're a regular natural phenomenon. The most powerful Category 5 storms, here in purple, occur most often as super typhoons in Asia. But the physics of climate change apply to all of them. Average ocean temperatures have been trending upwards for years, with a notable jump in the last two. Storms don't appear to be getting more frequent, but extra heat can increase wind speeds and warm air carries more rain.
We can expect more intense storms as a result, and islands really are the most vulnerable to these storms, because even if we have a forecast in advance that storm is going to make landfall in that island, people need to have somewhere safe to go to, and we need to make sure that the infrastructure is resilient so that we have the power supply and the water supply and the communications that are not impacted by that storm, so the community can bounce back quickly.
Cyclones will remain random, even with climate change, and islands like Mayotte are small targets. But when chance sends a storm their way, the odds are increasingly stacked against them, unless they're equipped, like larger, richer places, to adapt.
This is The World with me, Gillian Joseph. Next up, the identity of the suspected Chinese spy who's mixed with the very top of British society is finally revealed.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
You want a job in a normal life?
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
Welcome back. He befriended Prince Andrew and was photographed with former Conservative Prime Ministers David Cameron and Theresa May. Today, as he was publicly named for the first time, Chinese businessman Ten Baoyang denied being a spy. Instead, he said he'd fallen victim to what he called a changing political climate. His unmasking has led to calls in Westminster for Beijing to be officially declared a threat. Here's our home editor, Jason Farrell.
Yang Tongbo is the alleged Chinese spy who befriended a prince whilst being linked to an organisation whose aims are to disrupt the UK. His relationship with the Duke of York, on the face of it, promoted British and Chinese companies, but was described as having a covert and clandestine element, with Mr. Yang accused of engaging in deceptive activity for the Chinese Communist Party.
It's clear that Prince Andrew has, unbeknownst to himself perhaps, been a risk to our national security, and naming H6 will send a shudder down many people's spine, the people who are in our elite, who are at the heart of our government.
That's because Mr. Yang appeared to have penetrated the British establishment, meeting Prime Ministers Theresa May and David Cameron while running his consultancy called Hampton Group International. Here on China Central Television, he says he met Mr. Cameron at a Chinese New Year reception at number 10. Amid threats to name him in Parliament, Mr. Yang asked for the restrictions on his identity to be lifted, insisting he's not a spy, but a legitimate businessman. But MPs say he's one of many agents with an ulterior motive.
Yang Tongbo at H6 was in fact not a lone wolf. He was one of some 40,000 members of the United Works Department, which the Intelligence Security Committee report last year said, and I quote, "and known to government, had penetrated every sector of the UK economy, spying, stealing intellectual property, influencing and shaping our institutions."
Mr. Yang was born in China in 1974. In 2002, he came to the UK to study, including at the University of York. In 2013, he was granted indefinite leave to remain. And through his consultancy connections, by 2020, he was attending Prince Andrew's 60th birthday party. But in November 2021, he was stopped at a port under counter-terrorism laws and asked to hand over digital devices. As a result of that, in March 2023, the Home Secretary directed he should be excluded from the UK on national security grounds. Evidence on his devices revealed his strong links, both with the Communist Party and with the Duke of York.
Where individuals pose a threat, as you would expect, the UK government is absolutely committed to using the full range of powers available to disrupt them. I raised these issues when I was in Beijing a few weeks ago. This case does not exist, sadly, in a vacuum. The UK is in the most complex threat environment that we've seen for a very significant time.
While Mr. Yang has their pictures on his desk, both David Cameron and Theresa May say they don't know him and they've met thousands of people at numerous functions. But for Prince Andrew, whose aide told Mr. Yang he was at the very top of the tree among his close confidants, this is harder to shake off. The Duke says nothing sensitive was discussed and he ceased contact when concerns were raised. But, disgraced again, he won't be attending Sandringham this Christmas. Jason Farrell, Sky News.
From Chinese spies to mysterious drones which have appeared in the skies above New Jersey. Since last month, there have been dozens of sightings and even more conspiracy theories after the White House insisted there was no evidence of foreign involvement. Drone detection equipment has now been sent to the state of New York. The sightings all seem to cluster around the East Coast, with sightings reported in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Connecticut and New Jersey. And away from home, US military bases in the UK and Germany also appear to have been targeted. And today, President-elect Donald Trump weighed into the debate.
Our military knows where they took off from. If it's a garage, they can go right into that garage. They know where it came from and where it went. And for some reason, they don't want to comment. And I think they'd be better off saying what it is. Our military knows and our president knows. And for some reason, they want to keep people in suspense.
This is The World with me, Gillian Joseph. Next up, the story of a man detained in Dubai for 16 years who still maintains his innocence.
First Minister, how are you?
Good morning. Good morning. Very
nice
much,
to see you. How are you feeling?
Looking forward to getting into the parliamentary chamber.
Are you any further forward to making a decision?
No, it's an important day today.
All of the claims were in line with my parliamentary duties, so I'm making that clear to you, Conor.
He was a Scot through and through.
He was a very good politician.
Alex Salmond was controversial, he was a disruptor, but above all, he was respected.
Will you resign if you lose this week?
Again, I'm not planning to, of course, lose the vote of no confidence. I'm planning to win that vote of no confidence.
His face said it all.
My intention to stand down as party leader.
This is now a storm with deadly consequences. How are they feeling?
They're a bit scared at the minute.
We've been told to evacuate.
How are you feeling?
Devastated.
Hundreds of homes were wiped out by flooding. I'm Conor Gillis, Sky's Scotland correspondent.
It was probably the darkest time in my life.
Scott is 5 years sober after a cocaine addiction left him close to death.
Scotland has a shameful record, worse than England, the worst in Europe. So why not just say you've failed? Because then you might get more respect from families who've lost loved ones.
This is where one of the UK's most prolific rapists thought he'd got away with murder.
Sky News can reveal that former sex workers had told police he was sexually violent.
My Emma.
Free wherever you get your news. It's over, isn't it?
The Americans say he is Rossi, a fraudster.
This has been one of the most bizarre cases ever heard in a courtroom in this country.
A dangerous murderer.
Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive Andrew Innes after this?
She said she can forgive him, but as long as he's behind bars.
By doing the right thing, it's destroyed your life.
They terrorised me. They intimidated me.
Sky News, the full story first.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
Live here from Washington.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place. And all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Welcome back. I want to focus now on the story of a British property developer who was arrested in Dubai during the global financial crash and who's been in prison ever since. Ryan Cornelius won't be released until 2038, when he'll be 84 years old. His family and the United Nations are calling for his urgent release. His brother-in-law, Chris Paget, joins me now. Thank you very much for coming in to speak to us.
Thank you for having me.
First of all, I wonder if you can tell us about the conditions that your brother-in-law is being held in and what is his state of health like?
Well, conditions obviously in any prison are not great. In this particular one, there are about 8 of them in a cell the size of a container. It's pretty basic. It's always very, very cold. The air conditioning is kept on full blast. He doesn't have a blanket or anything like that, so the problem is actually cold. The diet is very rudimentary. Conditions are insanitary. I mean, he's had tuberculosis through exposure to an infected prisoner, which they didn't treat for 18 months. He's had COVID twice. He suffers cumulative ailments. When you've been in prison for 16 and a half years, your health will deteriorate, and his has, and we are concerned about that.
The UAE claimed that Ryan was convicted after a fair trial.
Well, I guess they would say that, wouldn't they? But all I can say is that the UN doesn't think so. The UN catalogued in great detail the sort of legal contortions which they went through in order to convict him, essentially for failure to pay a debt which the Dubai Islamic Bank had made damn sure that he wouldn't ever be in a position to pay. The Dubai Islamic Bank foreclosed on his loan, even though he was ahead of the agreed repayment schedule. They put him in solitary confinement. While he was in solitary confinement and unable to communicate with the outside world, they foreclosed on the loan and they took what they were after, the big property development in central Dubai called the Plantation. That was what they wanted. Having taken it, at his subsequent trial, they claimed that the Plantation was worthless. The Plantation was a major sort of residential and leisure estate complex.
What they're saying is that he illegally obtained a loan of £372 million by bribing staff members.
No, that's not true.
At the bank.
That is not true. Everything that he did at the instructions of his lender. Dubai was a rather complicated place at the time. He was doing business as his lender had instructed him to do. There was a change of chairman in between the time in which he signed a restructuring agreement and when he was imprisoned. But I think he became a sitting duck the moment that he agreed, as part of the restructuring agreement, to pledge all his commercial projects and his personal assets as security for the loan. The Plantation was valued independently for collateral purposes at over $1 billion. That was well more than twice the value of his loan. They took the Plantation. They claimed it was valueless. It is now being advertised, renamed as the Acres, as Dubai's latest prestige property development, with a plan that comprises 1,200 villas, the cheapest of which retails for over £1 million. Somebody has done very well out of a shakedown.
What are you hoping happens now? What do you want the government to do? Because you contacted Sir Keir Starmer ahead of his visit to UAE. What are you hoping to happen, and what sort of contact have you had from the government in terms of possible help?
Well, for most of the 16 and a half years Ryan has been in prison, there's been none. Now, Ryan's case is obviously a problem for the British Foreign Office. It has for decades touted the closeness of its relationship with the UAE as a kind of jewel in its diplomatic crown in the Middle East. And here you have prominent members of Dubai's hierarchy subjecting a British businessman to utter callous brutality, destroying him, destroying his family in the process. What do you do about that? Their posture for most of his 16 years has been to pretend that the problem doesn't exist, to look the other way, not to acknowledge it. It was only when the UN made its ruling that they finally got round to acknowledging it and then agreeing grudgingly to support a private family plea for clemency. They have not done what the UN has done, which is to call for Ryan's immediate release. Now, when Ryan heard that Sir Keir Starmer was visiting the UAE, he dictated an appeal to Keir Starmer from the prison telephone to me. I was able to ensure that it got to number 10 ahead of Keir Starmer's visit. Now, Keir Starmer chose not to heed that appeal.
Chris Paget, I'm so sorry we have run out of time, but thank you very much for coming in to tell us about the plight of your brother-in-law. Thank you.
Thank you.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before?
Yes.
Cheers.
We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
Day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Dense, heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
You want a job in a normal life?
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.